It's time to learn how to move our player with the forces. So I've got my game object kind of prepared. I've got this image of the pumpkin placed in our sprite renderer component. You can download any script you want really and just attach it. I've got player controller scripts attached to it already, but I will delete it so we can start fresh from the beginning. So just click on your player, wait a couple of seconds, and as you can see, if you delete the script or any other object that was attached as a component, there will be some warning that there is a script missing. So just remove it and we will add a new script. So add component, give it a name. I'll call it a player movement because we want to create a movement for our object, and just create an add. Script was added. So now we can open it. Just double click on the name of it like so. And we are inside the script. We are going to use some Rigidbody component to use some physics. So let's get back to Unity for now and just attach this component to our object. So just click on the player and add component, the Rigidbody component responsible for physics law. So we've got two of them, the Rigidbody and Rigidbody 2D. Of course, we're going to use Rigidbody 2D because we are working on 2D project. So we have to be consistent. We can't mix them both because there will be other components that will work with 2D or 3D as well. So we have to be consistent. If we decide that our project is 2D, we have to stick with 2D, like so. And here we've got plenty of stuff and we're not going to touch them just yet. Just leave it as it is. Let's press play and see what happens. And as you can see, our pumpkin has dropped. If you don't see it in the camera and you want to check where is it going or whatever, you can switch between these two tabs, game and scene. If you press on the scene, you can scroll down, and if we were fast enough we would see it falling, but it's already on the position -2000, which is quite far down, so there is no way of finding it. Actually, we could just press on our player, move our cursor to the scene and just press F. I could see it for now. Okay, but it is still dropping, so the F shortcut is to focus on some object that is on the scene. Let's click on it once again because now we were moved down. I will press F once again and we are back to our camera view, kind of. Okay, so as you can see, the physics are working fine. Our Rigidbody 2D component made our object to fall with the gravity force. But now we want somehow to stop our player from dropping down. How to do it? So the Rigidbody component, this is something we have to add it first. And then we have to add some colliders. So our object know where it should stay on the ground, where it should, like, I don't know, fly or, you know, fall down. So along with Rigidbody 2D component, we should add another component, which is called collider. So just start typing call. And here, as you can see, there are many different colliders. As I said before, we're interested in 2D option because we are working on 2D project. So we are going to use either box collider or capsule collider 2D, circle collider 2D, and so on. They work in exactly the same way, just they have different shape. Box collider 2D will have, of course, some rectangle shape, and the capsule collider will be like a capsule, and circle like the circle, of course. So we will decide which one to use according to our sprite, really. This is more like circle shape, so I will just use a circle collider 2D. And as you can see, we've got some green circle around our object. I think this is a bit too big, so we will just decrease it. Go down to see our circle collider component, and here you've got some fields that we can change. And there is a radius. So just hover over the radius so you can see that the cursor was changed, and now just slide it to the left and as you can see, we can make it to fit our sprite, like so. We don't have to be that precise, this is only an exercise, but I think this is looking pretty good. So we have our collider set, but if we press the play button, this is still falling down. Why? Because there is no ground. We didn't provide any other collider that it will collide with. So let's create another object and just call it ground. So right click, create empty, call it ground, and here we have to add a collider. So let's go to inspector window, add component, and as you can see we search for collider, so it's still there, so you don't have to type it again. And here, because it's supposed to be a ground, we can choose a box collider so it's nice and flat. And as you can see, we got some square green lines in the middle. I think we will just spread it so it's on the whole width of our camera. So just go to some options of this component, and here you can see the size X. Let's hover over it and just drag it to, of course, click and drag it to the right, like so. And now just click on the ground and move tool to position it in the place where you want it to be, like so. Of course, we didn't add any graphics, so we will just collide with it without seeing any ground, but it's okay for now. So just leave it as it is and press play. And now our pumpkin dropped and stayed on this ground object because the collision was detected. We have two ways of detecting, this collider. One of which is this collision, so that the pumpkin physically touched the collider and stopped on it. It's like you, that if you just touch the ground, you stay on it. But there is other ways of finding if some object is nearby. This is like if somebody stood behind you and they were breathing. You can feel somebody's presence behind you. So in order to do it, to don't have this physical contact that we can collide with, we are using this is trigger field. If you go to the circle collider, there is trigger option. If we tick it on and press play, we will still go through this collider. The collision was registered, but we still can go through like a ghost. Both of these options are very important, and we will use them both probably in most of our games. So let's talk when should we use which one. If we want to stay on this ground as we did before, of course we have to untick it so that when we press play, it drops down and stays on the ground. That's totally fine. But sometimes we have a functionality that we want to detect some presence, but we don't want to have this physical effect on it. We don't want to collide with it. We just want to detect the presence of somebody. So let's say we are going with this pumpkin to the right and there is some enemy on the right side. Let me do it quickly so you can see how it goes. I will just create a new empty, call it enemy, and I will add this component to it, box collider 2D, and I will increase the size of it like so, and in the Y axis as well. And if I move our enemy to the right, and I will offset this X to the left, let's say here is our enemy. Let's add some sprite renderer to it as well, and let's choose this pumpkin as well. This will be our enemy. Let's change the color of it so we know this is different. This is our ghost enemy. And this enemy will have a functionality. So whenever we touch or enter this green box, it will start shooting at us. If we are outside of this box, he doesn't see us. But once we enter it, he noticed us and starts shooting. So that's why we will use this field as a trigger. If it stays as it is now, we won't be able to pass this wall. This will be like a wall, not like a trigger. In order to make it a trigger, we of course have to set it as trigger. Let's move on to how to move our player with the forces. we've got our rigid body attached to it already, so we will use some velocity to move our player left and right. So let's go to the player movement component, and I called it player movement, but it's fine. Let's leave it as it is. So first thing we have to do, we have to reference our rigid body component. How to do it? We have to create a variable of type rigidbody2d. So let's do it. Rigid body, start typing. Auto suggestion is working fine. I'll call it RB. This is quite common practice to call this rigid body component just RB. And then in the start method, and now we are going to assign this component to this variable. We can do it in two ways, but I will show you the way I prefer. So RB and then assignment operator. And now we have to get this component. So just write get component and open brackets. And here we will provide the name of this component. So rigidbody2d. Close it and add parentheses, and we are done. Now inside of this variable we have this rigid body component. Let's go back to the script, and now once this rigid body component is assigned, we can use it to add some force or velocity. But of course we need to get the input from the user. If we press left, we need to know about it, and if we press right, we need to know about it as well, like we did before. So in that case, we have to create a float variable that we will call moveX. And now in our update method, we want to check the value of it, moveX, and assign input from the user to it. So input, and now get axis row, like we did before. Now we specify the horizontal axis. So now we get the value from -1 to 1. And now in order to move, we have to use this RB component. So when we are dealing with the forces and rigid body component, we shouldn't really use an update method. We should use a fixed update method. So if you start typing it, as you can see, auto completion is working fine. Now I will just press tabulator, and here you can see that it was auto completed. And in here we will use our rigid body variable. Now with the dot, we set the velocity of it to the new vector. So new vector. We can use new vector 2 because this is a 2D project, so it's totally fine to do it. And now inside the parentheses, we want to specify the x-axis first. So we have to add this moveX variable. And at the moment, we don't want to move on the y-axis, so just type 0f and semicolon at the end. So now if we go back to Unity, we should be able to move our character. It will drop down, and now if we press right or left, you can see that we can move it. But it is too slow, definitely. So what should we do? We should add some speed variable. So let's define our speed variable and assign some value to it, maybe 12. And then just multiply it by the speed. Just save it and go back, press play. And here you can see that we can move it a lot faster. Now you can see that it is dropping quite slowly. So you can increase the gravity scale if you want to, or we can turn off the gravity at all. So there will be no gravity. I will show you how to do it. If we set the gravity to 0, then it will stay where it is. As you can see, it is in the same place it was before. But if we assign like 5 value to it and press play, it will drop faster. Okay, and the last thing I want to show you in this lesson is when I press on the enemy, just to show you this trigger option. If I untick this trigger option, and then we will just collide with it like if it was a wall. And you can see we just rotate it. We can't go further because this is not a trigger. This is like a physical wall, like our ground. So this is how you will decide whether to use it as a trigger or as the, physical collision.